My best friend leaked my intimate photos thinking he'd get away with it. He has no idea that his life is about to fall apart, and I'll do it with a smile. My name is Mike. I'm 25, and recently my life has turned into a real show called Guess How Much Worse Things Can Get. Until now, everything was more or less fine. Work was okay. My relationship with Kelly was pretty good. We've been together for 6 months, and all this time, I thought we knew each other like the back of our hands. I also had a best friend, David, the kind of guy you go to bars with, handle problems together, and generally feel like it's the two of you against the world. David was that guy, or at least that's what I thought. And then all this crap started. One morning, out of nowhere, Kelly looks at me like I've just burned her favorite dress, or I don't know. Told her I've secretly been a serial killer. "We need to talk," she says, in that voice you never forget. It's the kind of tone that makes your insides twist, and you just know something bad is coming. I sit down, and she hands me her phone. And there they are. The photos. Our intimate, very private photos. There's one of her in lingerie, one of me naked as a baby. Only, this was definitely not some baby photo shoot. It turns out that these pictures, which I like an idiot sent her, somehow surfaced online, and not somewhere deep in the dark corners of the internet, but right on one of the most popular forums. You know that feeling when your life just falls apart in seconds? That was this moment. I look at her face, and it's immediately clear. She thinks I'm the one who leaked the photos. Her eyes are burning with anger, and she's doing everything she can to hold back tears. Every word she says feels like a punch to the gut. "Did you think this was funny? Did you think you could humiliate me like this?" And I'm just sitting there, clueless as to how this even happened. My brain refuses to accept it. All I could say at that moment was, "Damn, Kelly, I have no idea how this happened." But what's the use? She doesn't care about my excuses. In her eyes, I'm the jerk who betrayed her trust, who sold our most intimate moments for some twisted show. But the thing is, I didn't do it. I have no idea who did or why, but one thing's for sure. It wasn't some random hack. Someone deliberately decided to destroy my relationship with Kelly, and that person knew exactly where to hit. My heart shrank to the size of a pea, and then came an endless string of accusations and arguments. Since then, time became weird. Every meeting with Kelly turned into torture. She'd look at me with suspicion, as if I was some kind of traitor. I even tried to find out how the photos could have been leaked, but nothing. The internet is a black hole, and if you put something in there, you can be sure it's not coming back. But that was only the beginning. Okay, if you think that's where it all ended. Nope, not even close. Remember how I said someone knew exactly where to hit? Well, it turned out this wasn't just a random leak. It was a targeted attack on me personally. Every day things got worse. Kelly distanced herself more and more, and I was losing my last chances to prove my innocence. She kept giving me sideways looks, asking suspicious questions, and honestly, I felt like I was walking on a minefield. One wrong move, and I'd be knee-deep in new accusations. "Why did you do it, Mike?" she kept asking, again and again, and all I could do was stammer and say something like, "I don't know. I swear, it wasn't me, honestly." I started to think I was losing my mind. Maybe I somehow sent those photos in a fit of insanity, or maybe someone did hack me after all. But whoever it was, they clearly knew how to hurt me. One night, I was sitting at home, mindlessly scrolling through social media, when I came across a post from one of our mutual friends. It was just some funny meme, but there was a small comment from David, my best friend, the guy I practically grew up with, and that's when it hit me like a lightning bolt. I remembered that, on the day those intimate pictures were taken, David was also at my place. He came over for something while Kelly was in the bathroom. At the time, I didn't think much of his sudden visit, but now everything was falling into place in the worst possible way. David, the guy who knew about my relationship, knew about Kelly, and knew how important it was to keep those moments just between us. This asshole knew everything, and something about it just wouldn't let me rest. What the hell was he even doing at my place that day? We didn't usually hang out that randomly, and he just happened to show up at the worst possible time. And the most suspicious thing? He had been acting kind of strange for the last couple of weeks. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence, but after the photos leaked, his weird behavior started looking more like I have a dirty secret, and I don't know how to live with it. Okay, I'm no Sherlock Holmes, but there were too many suspicions piling up. I decided I needed to dig deeper, because if it really was David, well, he was already dead to me. Now, listen to how I started tracking this down. I knew he wasn't some tech genius who could cover his tracks. After all, we'd been friends since childhood, and I knew all his weaknesses, including his dumb habit of leaving his electronics without any passwords. And then, like magic, something clicked in my brain. I remembered that I once joked to him that he had a dumb password, his wife's birthday. Why I remembered that, I don't know, but it became my starting point. So one night, I decided to take things seriously. I got on my laptop and started looking for a way to trace where those damn photos had come from. The first thing I needed to do was re-upload them to the web and try to track the path back to their source. Yeah, this sounds like some genius hacker movie plan. But honestly, there are a ton of services like that online. I uploaded the photos, entered all the data I could, and after a few minutes I got the result. When I saw where that file was uploaded from, I nearly had a heart attack. The IP address pointed directly to David's house. Can you even imagine what that was like for me? My best friend, the guy I'd shared everything with, from teenage crushes to our dirtiest secrets, leaked my private photos online. That was the moment when my world turned upside down, and the person I thought was my brother turned out to be, well, a real piece of scum. I didn't know how to react. At first, I just wanted to storm into his house and punch him, demanding to know why he did it. But then, it hit me. If I wanted to get real revenge, I had to be smart about it. I wanted him to suffer the way I was suffering, and that's when a plan started to form in my head. So, I had proof that David leaked my intimate photos, and it wasn't just some careless mistake. It was a deliberate stab in the back by someone I considered a brother. But instead of turning this into some drama with fists flying like a low-budget action movie, I decided to play it smart. You know what they say. Revenge is a dish best served cold. And in my case, cold. With a big helping of poison. If he wanted to ruin my life, I was going to repay him with interest. Now, here's where things get interesting. David was married to Emma. She was one of those girls who looked like an angel on the outside, but could raise hell if anyone crossed her. Emma never really trusted me, even though we rarely spoke. Her intuition always told her I was too wild to be friends with her perfect husband. Well, her intuition was finally about to work in my favor. I already knew that David wasn't as faithful as he tried to seem. Once, during a drunken night at some party, he let it slip that he had an affair on the side. At the time, I was too wasted to give it much thought. Who even remembers those kinds of things at parties? But now, this piece of information was like gold. Emma, of course, was clueless, believing David to be the perfect husband, and I was about to shatter that image into a million pieces. My plan was as simple as a hangover sandwich: expose David to Emma in a way that he could never recover from. But it had to be done carefully. Not just some accidental reveal. No, I wanted it to be a complete, irreversible collapse of his life. And the key was to make it look like it wasn't my doing. I started by gathering intel. First, I needed to casually chat with David about his relationship. Hey man, how's Emma? Still making those fantastic lasagnas? As usual, he tried to act like the caring husband, saying everything was perfect, that she was the best. But I knew it was all lies. Within minutes, he was back to bragging about his side adventures. He always thought I supported his conquests, and that his little misdeeds would stay between us. Well, not this time, buddy. I didn't argue with him. I just listened as he, like an idiot, gave me all the details I needed. Who, when, where, you know, the classic scumbag stuff. You're my bro. Who else can I trust with my secrets? Oh, David, if only you knew what your bro had planned for you. Now, I just needed to gather evidence. This is where good old technology came in handy. I knew David kept his flirty conversations with his mistresses on his laptop. And as I mentioned earlier, his password was so weak a first grader could crack it. Emma's birthday. Yep, you heard me right. This moron used his wife's birthday as the password for everything, from his email to social media. And forget about two-factor authentication. He probably didn't even know what that was. One day, while we were hanging out at his place, I told him I needed to check my email urgently, and of course, asked to borrow his laptop. David didn't even blink when he handed it over, fully trusting that I wouldn't betray him. But instead of checking my email, I opened up his chat with his latest fling. Oh yes, everything was there. Photos, messages, even videos. The guy wasn't just cheating on Emma. He was saving it all like some twisted souvenir. And being the good friend I am, I took screenshots of every single one of those souvenirs. Now, I had everything I needed. The evidence that would completely destroy his life. Emma had to see this with her own eyes. But the question was, how to make the moment unforgettable. I wanted to do it in a truly epic way. This couldn't just be a simple message or a phone call with the evidence. No, I wanted to put on a show that David would never forget. And when you're planning something like this, the details matter. The idea hit me during one of our friends' parties. It was a typical evening with beer, chips, and boring work talk. But I noticed one thing. These gatherings always ended with people talking about their personal lives. First, they'd gossip about whoever wasn't there, and then the conversation would shift to those present. And there it was. The perfect moment for my final blow. I decided the best place to reveal the truth was during a dinner with friends, where everyone was relaxed, and Emma was still confident in the perfection of her marriage. A public humiliation like that, David would never recover. I started preparing. Right after that party, I arranged with a couple of mutual friends to invite me, Emma, and David to the next gathering at their place. It all had to seem like a typical get-together, nothing suspicious. Even David, the idiot, couldn't have imagined what was coming. In the week leading up to it, I met up with him a few times to make sure he didn't suspect a thing. He kept telling his stories about his affairs, thinking we were still best buddies. Not knowing I was about to become his worst enemy, I just nodded and smiled, pretending I was still on board with his scummy behavior. The day of the dinner came. We gathered at our friend's place, and everything was going according to plan. Food, drinks, dumb jokes. I watched David's every move. He had no idea this would be his last evening as the perfect husband. Emma sat next to him, looking like the typical happy couple. No one knew that, within minutes, I was going to destroy their little family fantasy. After everyone had eaten and was starting to relax, I knew it was time. The conversation had shifted to relationships, as it always does at these things. Emma, as usual, began praising her wonderful husband, saying how caring he was and how much he helped around the house. Yeah, great start to the disaster I was about to unleash. I waited until everyone was loosened up and then decided to strike. "Hey, Em, did you know David has a side to him you might not have seen yet?" I said, with the most innocent smile I could manage. Emma laughed, thinking I was joking. David tensed up, but he hadn't yet realized this wasn't a joke. "What do you mean?" she asked, still giggling. The other smiled too, thinking I was about to tell some silly story, but my joke, as they say, had a very sharp edge. I pulled out my phone, opened the folder with all the photos, and showed her the screen. You should have seen her face at that moment. At first, she didn't understand what she was looking at, and then her eyes widened, and she went pale. The room fell silent. You know how in movies, someone drops a glass, and the sound is deafening? That's exactly how it felt. David immediately realized he was caught. He tried to grab the phone from me, but I had already prepared for this. The moment Emma saw one of those pictures, I'd already sent the entire archive to her phone so she could review it as many times as she wanted. David was now trapped, with no way out. "What, dude? Can't lie your way out of this anymore, huh?" I taunted, savoring every second of his suffering. He was in full panic mode. Emma started screaming. Everyone in the room was frozen in shock. Someone even dropped their fork. This was the moment David's world came crashing down. He tried to mumble some excuse, but it was too late. Emma stormed out of the room, phone in hand, and I knew she was looking at those photos and messages in disbelief and disgust. David ran after her, but I knew the night was just beginning. David bolted after Emma like a wounded animal, and that's when the real show started. I sat there, watching the chaos unfold, feeling like the director of a dramatic film that was about to win an Oscar for Best Screenplay. Emma burst into the living room, phone in hand, her face flushed red with rage, and honestly, I was a little scared for David. She was that furious. The guests' eyes nearly popped out of their heads. So much for a cozy evening with friends, right? Emma stopped in the middle of the room, holding up her phone, and started screaming at David. "You bastard! Is this you?" She was literally shaking with fury. I had never seen her like that before. Even the dogs outside stopped barking. It was that intense. David stood there like a deer caught in headlights. He was in shock, his face going from red to pale in a matter of seconds. The only thing he managed to squeeze out was a pathetic, "Emma, it's not what you think." But there was no stopping her now. She began shouting insults so vicious that even I, to be honest, felt a little uncomfortable. Just a little. She was waving the phone around, showing everyone in the room the photos and messages I had sent her. "These are your damn videos, right? This is you with that whore, huh?" she screamed, getting so close to him that I was sure she was about to hit him. David tried to say something, but his lame excuses just sounded absurd. "It's all out of context. Those photos are misleading." "Dude, seriously, context? What kind of nonsense is that?" At this point, the other guests began to snap out of their shock. Some tried to calm Emma down, but it was like trying to cap a volcano that was already erupting. She wasn't just shouting. She was practically flying around the room, shoving her phone in everyone's face, showing them the evidence, whoever was willing to look. One of our friends, Mark, tried to intervene, but Emma was beyond reasoning. She turned on him, yelling, "Did you know about this? Did you know too, huh?" Her voice was full of hysteria. But the best part, David's face. It was the face of absolute defeat. He had stopped trying to defend himself. He just stood there, dumbstruck, realizing he'd fallen into the trap he had dug for himself. You could see the confidence drain out of him with every second. He was grasping for any sliver of hope, but deep down, he knew this was it. Game over. At that moment, Emma made a beeline for the door, clearly determined to leave and never look back. And do you know what David did? He actually tried to stop her. Yeah, he really grabbed her arm and begged her to listen to him. It was such a pitiful sight that I almost felt a pang of regret. Almost. But this was all so well deserved. "Let go of me, you bastard!" Emma shouted, shoving him away. "You think I'll come back to you after this? You think I'll ever trust you again?" Her voice cracked with rage and pain, and I knew this was the final blow. Everything I had planned was unfolding with perfect precision. She yanked her hand free from his grip and stormed out the door, and as David, realizing she was really leaving, began to break down like a child who'd lost his favorite toy, I couldn't help but feel a strange satisfaction. He ran after her, shouting something incoherent, but Emma didn't look back. She slammed the door so hard behind her that I swear my heart skipped a beat from the sound. And then silence, the kind of silence that lingers after a bomb goes off. You know that awkward moment when everyone is just standing there, not knowing what to do, because the situation is so intense that no one wants to be the next one to speak. David, crushed and utterly humiliated, stood in the middle of the room with his head down. I knew this was the end for him. No one knew what to say. Even Mark, who was usually the chatty one, sat quietly in the corner, sipping his beer, avoiding eye contact with David. This was my moment of complete victory. I had accomplished what I wanted. David lost everything in one night, and I, sitting in the chaos, felt damn good about it. When Emma left, leaving behind the ruins of David's life, it seemed like the end. But in reality, it was just the beginning. You know that feeling when everything quiets down but the tension is still thick in the air? That's exactly what happened. Everyone sat on edge, not sure what to say, as if someone had pressed pause on this horror show. But the film reel kept spinning. David stood there, staring at the floor. He looked like a man who'd just been hit by an atomic bomb. And while you could argue he deserved every bit of this, watching his life crumble before our eyes was still surreal. The guy who always seemed so confident, so carefree, now looked like a broken dog. But in that moment, I couldn't afford to feel compassion. No, he dumped too much crap on me. And this was my time to shine. A few minutes after Emma stormed out, the room was still filled with an uncomfortable silence. Our friends didn't know what to do. They all turned away, pretending to drink their beers, though no one actually took a sip. And then, David snapped out of his trance and lunged at me. "This was you, wasn't it? You did this, you bastard!" he shouted, charging at me with his fist raised, and for a moment, I thought he was really going to hit me. He was furious, his face red, his eyes burning with rage. He was losing it, but I was ready. I stood up from the couch and looked him straight in the eye, showing no fear. Sure, he might have been stronger physically, but right then, he was broken inside, and that was my territory. "Yeah, it was me," I said coldly. "And what are you gonna do about it, David? 'Cause more of a scene. Ruin your life even further. Dude, you brought this on yourself." He froze, like my words slapped him across the face. He looked around at everyone in the room, but no one came to his defense. Everyone sat there, pretending they weren't part of this mess, because no one wanted to get involved in this disaster. It was just me and David, face to face. And I didn't care that he looked like he was about to kill me. I'd been holding in this anger for too long, and now was the time to let it all out. "You leaked my private photos, dude. You started this game," I continued, stepping closer to him. I saw his fist clench, but he didn't hit me. "You betrayed me. Like a coward, like a rat. And you think I'm just gonna sit here and take it? That I'll cry while you enjoy your pathetic little life?" He stepped back, realizing that I was dead serious, completely calm and confident. His face turned pale, and I could see panic flicker in his eyes. He knew he was stuck, that no one, not even his friends, would back him up. This was the moment when his crown finally fell, but the most interesting part came when he tried to justify himself. "Dude, I didn't mean to. He started, his voice cracking. You should have heard him. He stood there, stammering pathetically, trying to wriggle his way out, but I wasn't having it. "You didn't mean to? Really? You just leaked my photos? Ruined my relationship with Kelly? And you call that not meaning to?" I was boiling with anger, but I kept control. "Do you even understand what you've done, David? You killed our friendship, you killed your relationship, and you've killed yourself." He tried to say something again, but the words stuck in his throat. I knew in that moment he wanted to tear me apart, but a physical fight wasn't going to fix his problems. He'd already lost, and everyone in the room knew it. "You thought you could mess with my life and just get away with it. Dude, you buried yourself," I finished, looking him dead in the eyes. That was the final word. He understood there was nothing left to say, that his life had crumbled beyond repair. And then, he did something I didn't expect. He just turned around and walked out, just like that, silently. He didn't say another word, just left the house. And you know, it was so symbolic. He wasn't just leaving the room, he was walking away from his old life. In that moment, I realized he wasn't just defeated, he was completely destroyed. The rest of the guests sat in stunned silence. Some exchanged glances, but no one dared to comment. I stood there for a few seconds more, then calmly returned to the couch and took a long sip of beer. Honestly, it was the most refreshing beer of my life. Now that David was gone, there was this strange pause. The few people left seemed unsure of what to do. The show was over, but it left a bitter aftertaste in the air. At first, no one dared to speak. We all sat there as if someone had just carried a fresh corpse out of the room, and now no one knew what to do next. The awkwardness hung in the air, as if we had all witnessed something so personal and dirty that it would have been better if we had never seen it. I knew everyone felt uncomfortable. After all, this was their friend David. He had been part of their lives, and no one expected to see him in such a light. But no one said that I had gone too far. Everyone understood that I had done what I had to do. Finally, Mark, one of our old friends, was the first to break the silence. "Hey Mike, that was harsh, but I can't say he didn't deserve it." I nodded, but didn't say anything. I didn't feel the need to justify myself, and I wasn't going to. The others seemed to agree with him, but there was still a strange vibe in the air. It was obvious that no one wanted to discuss what had happened in detail, but at that moment I realized that even if they weren't saying it out loud, they were on my side too. From the following week, rumors about what had happened began to spread through our circle of friends. Some supported me, some tried to avoid the topic altogether, and some just disappeared from our social group, not wanting to get dragged into the drama. The scandal was just too big. Up until this point, David had been known as the fun guy, the life of the party, and the fact that his dirty deeds had come to light made many people reconsider who they thought their friend was. As for David, his life truly fell apart. Emma filed for divorce just a couple of days after that dinner, and of course, she took everything: the house, the money, even the dog they had gotten a couple of years ago. I heard she filed for a division of assets in such a way that he was left with almost nothing. Apparently she decided that, since his betrayal had cost her everything, he shouldn't be left with anything either. David's work life wasn't much better. We both worked for the same company, and it wasn't hard for me to find out from colleagues that his professional life was crumbling as well. He started having issues with management, and most of his coworkers, after learning what had happened, began to distance themselves from him. People love gossip, and scandals like this rarely go unnoticed. In the end, David was fired a few months after that dinner, and if you think that's where it all ended, think again. I heard that he was drowning in debt because Emma had won almost everything in the divorce. Sometimes I'd run into him in town, on the streets, near the old spots we used to hang out at, but this was no longer the same David. He looked pathetic, broken, his constant confidence, his smile. It was all gone. Every time I saw him, he'd lower his gaze and quickly try to get away, as if he were afraid to meet my eyes. That was the moment I realized I had truly broken him, completely. Friends often asked me if I regretted what I had done. Honestly, I don't regret it. This guy betrayed me. He leaked my intimate photos, destroyed my relationship with Kelly, and made me look like a fool in front of someone I loved. He deserved what he got and more. And I didn't take pleasure in watching his life crumble into ruins, but I didn't feel any pity either. It was his fault. He chose this. Now, when I think about all of it, I realize that revenge is a strange thing. At first, it seems like it will bring you satisfaction, but then you realize it's just emptiness. Yes, I got my revenge. Yes, I destroyed his life, but I didn't get mine back. Kelly was still distant, and our relationship never recovered after the scandal. She could no longer trust me. Even after she learned the truth about David, something inside her had broken, and I couldn't fix it. So, in the end, both David and I ended up as losers. I got my revenge, but I lost more than I had expected. As time went on, despite all the chaos I had created around myself and David, life somehow kept moving forward. My revenge was complete, but the feeling of emptiness still lingered inside me, like I had won the battle but couldn't taste victory. Yes, I had ruined the life of the person who betrayed me, but at the same time, I realized that revenge couldn't restore what had been lost, not in the slightest. The satisfaction of seeing David suffer didn't last as long as I thought it would. As for Kelly, our relationship never recovered. She learned the truth. She found out that I'd been the victim in this story, but that didn't change anything. I tried to regain her trust, but it seemed like everything that had happened had cut too deep a wound. We became strangers. No matter how many times I explained that I wasn't at fault, her faith in me was already shattered, like a house of cards that falls apart at the slightest breeze. In the end, we just drifted apart, and it left a painful scar. Even knowing that I had won my little war with David didn't soften the blow. Since then, I've barely run into David, maybe a few times by accident. Our town isn't that big. Whenever I saw him, he looked even more like a shadow of his former self. He looked like a man whose life had collapsed, and there was nothing left worth fighting for. I heard he was trying to find a job, but his reputation was so ruined that no one wanted to deal with him. In the end, he moved out of the apartment he and Emma used to share and relocated to some rundown place. He avoided our mutual friends like the plague, and I knew for sure that he would never be the same again. Sometimes, I think I even started to feel a bit sorry for him. Yes, I know it sounds strange, especially after what he did, but in the end, I also understood that I was the one who finished him off. I orchestrated his public humiliation, and that not only destroyed his marriage and his life, but left him completely alone. Was he the villain in this story? Absolutely. But looking back, I began to wonder, was it really worth it? Because in the end, I lost just as much, if not more. The final blow came when my relationships with my friends started to change too. After that dinner, people started to treat me differently. No one said it outright, but I knew they saw me as someone who could do the same thing to any of them. Even those who had been on my side started to act cautiously. They had seen what I was capable of, and it scared them. And then it hit me. Revenge isn't a tool that solves problems. It destroys, leaving only ruins in its wake. One day, a few months after the scandal, I got a message from David. He was asking to meet. I didn't know what to expect, but I decided to go. Maybe, deep down, I wanted to hear an apology from him. Or maybe I just wanted to put an end to our story once and for all. We met at an old bar where we used to hang out a lot. David looked even worse than I remembered. Gaunt, with lifeless eyes. He sat at the table, twirling a glass of cheap whiskey in his hand. "Listen, Mike," he began, and his voice was filled with bitterness. "I just wanted to say, you were right. I messed up everything. I made a huge mistake and I paid for it." I sat there, watching him, feeling neither anger nor satisfaction. All I felt was emptiness. He kept talking, explaining how everything had spiraled out of control, how he never thought the consequences would be so devastating. But none of it mattered anymore. I was listening, but deep down, I knew it was already too late. At the end of the conversation, he simply said, "I understand that I can never regain your trust, and maybe I don't deserve it, but forgive me, if you can." I didn't respond. Forgive? Maybe, but it wouldn't change anything. I just nodded and left, leaving him alone in that bar, just like before. That was our last conversation. Looking back now, I realized this story doesn't have a happy ending. David lost everything, and so did I. Revenge didn't bring me joy or relief. It just left a void. Maybe there was a lesson in that. Maybe next time I'll handle things differently. But for now, I just move on, knowing that sometimes Even victory feels like defeat.